There we go. So I don't know what's going to happen now. So we got one good video for today. How are we doing? Everybody good? Right on. Thank you so much for being here in the middle of the day on a Friday or afternoon. I think it's just, I wasn't really sure how I wanted to do the talk, but I wanted to give an opportunity for me to think out loud. So if you'll bear with me, I'll think out loud and think about just the show and putting together the show. This was a group show, and Ray was really, who's back there, was really instrumental in just reaching out in like October, November, and asking if I wanted to do a show here. And I was like, yeah, that sounds really cool. And just thinking of the context of the library and thinking about putting artwork, context kind of is everything in art, because you can have, I'm thinking right now, I'm thinking of Rothko, a Rothko painting. You can have a Rothko painting, and Rothko was like really specific on the lighting. It was like dim lighting is really important for some of his paintings. It was like a requirement. So that's context, right? That's what he wanted, and that painting would have felt different if it was in a different lighting. So every time I think about installation of art, I'm thinking about the context of the library, the architecture, and the context of an institution, and the context of glass, and how do we intervene, interrupt, disrupt in that context? How do we bring something that is authentic? And I saw something that is kind of viral, and you have to go deeper into the thought process, but it still rings true. A meme I saw, and the meme was that the artist is the glitch in the matrix, and the artist is interrupting the context of something. And so that was important for me with these pieces, was to interrupt the context of the library and interrupt the context of the institution. But still, I didn't really step outside of like the bounds. We didn't, break any glass or light anything on fire or burn anything. But I wasn't really interested in that. I was also interested in giving artists dignity and a voice and a platform. So I asked Laura Jean Foster and Joe Bunquillo, Benjamin Bartlett, and Kay Blankenship to be a part of it with me, because I have most of you have been to my studio and know I have plenty of art in there that I could fill up any space. But that wasn't what I was interested in. I was interested in giving some space and holding space for other artists. And so I asked those artists to come on board and submit art or just give art. It wasn't a real rigorous process because I knew their work. Ben had never worked with foam and just made these foam food and was just working. I said, he didn't have anything, and I was like, I really want you in this show. And he was like, okay. And I knew he was under pressure. He was like, I don't have nothing. I was like, no, that's cool, that's perfect. Perfect landscape, perfect conditions to make good art. And so he came up with these pieces, and then it's just been going crazy. They're beautiful, all recycled, and just making this. And I thought it would be good to have those works in conversation with Kay's work, which Kay is doing sculpture that is that ocean, aquatic kind of theme, kind of alien, kind of slug, kind of eel, kind of snake, and really just taking that softness of the S curve and the form, but it's hard in clay. And I thought that would be great to put as a foundation, and then put that plastic art on top of it, and just really kind of point to, or maybe a gentle prompt to, those plastic oceans and our relationship to plastic. And I'm not gonna do a fire and brimstone about plastic, but just wanted to touch that. And then Laura, I've been wanting to work with her work, and so the trick was with Laura's work was to find work that could fit in this context, in this size. Laura does big sculptures and installations with wood, and this is just a part of her working with forms and small sculptures, and I thought it was they're really beautiful and very much her, and I wanted her voice to come through, so I brought those in. And then Joe, I wanted him to be involved partly because each one of these artists I love them as friends. And so Joe, I just love him. And he gave me a bag at the end of grad school with some debris in it. The debris got thrown away, but the bag was still around, and I was like, oh yes, dude, this has power. I said, you want this in the show? And his work is ready-made, and that's what he does. So so it was really fun to have his work in the show, and have he does real ready-made conceptual work. So that was super cool to have that in the show. And then, who else? Am I missing anybody? Oh, then my work. So my work, this glass right here, I titled it as My Black Museum. And it's really in conversation with Pope L. And Pope L just passed away, and Pope L is a dear artist that everybody should look up. Everybody should know who Pope L is. And he had a piece called My Black Factory, or The Black Factory. And it had a theme song, and it's just prolific. All of his work is prolific. A very special artist, and that was just a nod to Pope L of My Black Museum, of like, if I had a little museum, what would it be? And it would literally be scraps of wood and little sculptures that you find in the desert, of me playing in the desert. I'm from the desert, so it really would be that. And that became important to me. And then I wanted to do a mask that wasn't stolen, so I made a little mini mask. And I'm like, speaking of my Nigerian roots, and I was like, look, let me make something that, like, I can remake the mask that I want, and nobody stole it. Like, I made that. So that was important, so I made that. And then putting the Who Was Violent in Your Behalf, that's a piece that we did downtown Olympia, and we did downtown Portland, and then we put it on clothes, and people are wearing it and really using it as a tool of resistance for themselves. And I think just working with that piece, and then I put some sculptures in there, because that would be dope, you know, to have your own sculptures, not sculptures, I'm sorry, ceramics. So I put little ceramic pots, and I'm always, when I make ceramic pots, I'm always thinking of David Drake. David Drake was the slave potter, and so you can look up all of his work, and I always want to kind of nod and honor that. So that right there was pretty much the whole show. Oh, then there's wood pieces. Maybe I can talk about that later. But I don't know, is there anybody with questions? I can pause for questions, and then I can get into poems. And I did sing a little bit ago before you got here. I may sing later. But there we go. Yes?
Tell us some more about your Nigerian roots.
So, I just did the Ancestry, or 21, whatever it is, the stuff you do online. And what came back was that I was like 80% African, and most of that was Nigerian. And I realized, I was saying this earlier, I realized that a lot of what I thought was my personality is like how Nigerians actually just act, you know, the loud, I'm being all civilized here, but I'm very unorthodox and very just like, how you doing? And then if you see me and then you go see Nigerians that don't know me, you're going, oh shit, there's Travis, you know, and really it's, I'm them, they are me, that type of thing. So that's been really new to me, because I never had done that research, and in recent years I started doing that research and just seeing where I was from, you know, and what that bloodline looked like. And then what was really wild is my sister had done it and did a different platform and dug up some of the tribes that we come from, the people. And now here's where it gets crazy. I had done a bunch of paintings, and I didn't know any of these tribes or any of these people, where they come from. I had done a whole bunch of paintings. And then if you Google these tribes and you get pictures of these people, they look exactly like these paintings. Yeah. So that shit is just in you. And I was like, oh, all right, it really is in us, you know. I had no idea. And I had just done these paintings, and she goes, oh, here's all the names and all the tribes, all the different regions. And I started Googling each one of these tribes, and when you Google them, you're seeing yourself. You're going, oh, that's me, that's aunt so-and-so, that's uncle so-and-so, that's cousin so-and-so. It still is there, right? And all that information is still held in us. So that's been that journey. So now I just lean into it. I don't try and, I don't even question it. I just let it come through when I'm painting, because I'm always painting faces, you know, and lips and noses and eyes and bone structure. because that's important just to push back, you know, and hold space. So yeah, good question, thank you. I think I'll take a little see if this is cooled off enough. That was some hot water, they weren't playing. Gonna watch me burn myself. That's perfect. We ready for a poem? Yeah? This is Religion and Labor. And this is small print, and I'm like, shoot, I hope I can see all this, but here we go. Religion and Labor, 4:45 a.m. Leather boots laced up strong, a dirty lunchbox, prayer before sunrise, iron H-beams, burning rod at 5:45 a.m. The smell of hot metal, steel beams, still hands, life of an Iron Man, a closet of prayer, laughter. We build buildings to last for 1,000 years, playing basketball in steel-toed boots. They called him Rev, they called him for prayer. They made weights out of scrap metal. They hammered with the beat, not tapped. PTSD from working in the hole. He ain't never been right. He pulled an assault rifle in a knife fight. It was a prison yard with no fences. It's how we ate. It's how we all ate. Pastor Steve got convicted, but his daughter could sing those gospel songs. When she sang, I was convinced there was a heaven, and I was going there. Church melodies floated out of the front door into the neighborhood. Sister Guadalupe sent an oil-soaked handkerchief to Mexico for her daughter to get healing, and it worked. It was my mother's idea, and no one was confused. We knew the devil was alive and well, but God had him in a chokehold. Brother Mayorino's voice shook the neighborhood, 12-gauge shotgun pumping into the back of a white van. We knew they got him when the neighborhood got silent. You know things are bad when the air gets silent. It was long before we found the desert. The desert silence was much older. It gave us room to watch and pray. A load to the dump, prayer meeting, a leaky pipe, provisionally painting our life to get home. The highway got longer each year. Plaid shirts, suspenders, callous hands, tired eyes, a gentle, contagious smile, watching a Western, a ride for a stranger, a ride for a loved one, anointing the sick, the voice way before a note was ever sung, the voice that vibrated the lids of my childhood, using his hands to get the job done, creating art with no degree, doing 2 days' work in 1 day's time, 11:45 p.m. And that's labor, religion and labor. Thank you. This is an excerpt from the poem Utterance. And this is all in my latest book, Before Black Outdoors thesis exhibition. Okay, so this is Utterance. If I still away for too long, the work won't get done. Each mark with a remark is needed to push the painting to the edge. This project is 300 years old. Some of the work will sit in rich white houses, and some will rest in songs, ancient melodies tapping back to a village, and no one knows the name. Most of this got lost in the ocean. We stomp so hard to a fake religion. We make songs along the way. It gets us through, but not all the way through. At best, the prayer is provisional. We fake the system and hide in plain sight. It's time to rest more than it's time to fight. Our skin will tell the story. There is the first black of everything, a slave with no ship, a slave with no ship, from parcel to hips, an object of desire. Sex slaves sang songs too. It's right there on the list. This one is without child. It's almost like new. As Douglas Kearney would say, if you're going to be consumed, at least be poisonous. There we go. Thank you. So I'm thinking, if there aren't any more questions, maybe do one more song and call it good. Yeah? Yeah. All right. Hold on just a little while longer. Hold on just a little while longer. Hold on just a little while longer. Everything will be all right. Fight on just a little while longer. Fight on just a little while longer. Fight on just a little while longer. Everything will be all right. March on just a little while longer. March on just a little while longer. March on just a little while longer. Everything will be all right. Preach on just a little while longer. Preach on just a little while longer. Preach on just a little while longer. Everything will be all right. Fight on just a little while longer. Fight on just a little while longer. Fight on just a little while longer. Everything will be all right. Everything will be all right. There we go. Thank you. Thank you. So if you have any questions, I'll pause for a little bit and take a sip, or want to talk about something, or you got a song yourself. Come on, watch out. Yes.
First of all, that was really good, obviously.
Thank you.
So I don't know if you talked about this earlier or if I missed it, but I want to know what your art is like all about.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, that'll people get their money's worth. Thank you for that question. So a lot of what my art is about, what I'm always trying to capture is rural Black folks. And what it means to be a rural Black folk, because there's this really interesting relationship with Black people in the land in the context of America, because of how we came here through the Middle Passage into slavery. That was our introduction. And then forced labor and all the horrors of that and all the carnage around that. And then there was like all of the stuff that happened with Jim Crow. And then a lot of people went to the city and went to places out of the South trying to find some sort of way to live, some sort of relief, and there was, LA has that long history, and all of these cities, Oakland has this deep history from people leaving the South, and then the same thing with New York, they're trying to find like a place to be in the city, and they're all country folks, they come from the plantation. And so what happens is they lose this relationship with the land because they're just doing the city thing. They're doing the urban jungle and they're doing the ghettos and the projects. But then there are groups of Black people that stayed on the land and never left. And they stayed, and what is that about? And those black folks don't get on TV and they don't get in mainstream media. They don't have a story. And that's where I'm from. I'm from those black people that stayed on the land and that never left. And it's not a critique of those that left at all, or it's not a oh, that's just what happened. We stayed. We're country folk. And I realized, you never hear the country folk story outside of slavery, outside of this. You don't hear country folks that raised and ate food. Like, if you come around my family, they'll tell you about food they've raised, and you'll be on the edge of your seat just listening to them talk about collard greens and cabbage and watermelons. And my uncle, my father, and my grandfather all moved. Well, they kind of went to the city. My uncle did, and my grandfather. My father went back to the desert and put us in the desert as a family. So my art is about that. It's about being out. It's about being the son and grandson of men that lived in the Midwest and women that lived in the Midwest and that were country folk, country black folk, and that moved out to California in the 50s. And my uncle would have in South Central LA on 81st and Dinker, in his backyard, the whole back side of the backyard was covered with rabbits, cages. That was his protein. And then the garden was zucchini, peppers, tomatoes, greens, collard, mustard, kale, squash, right? Carrots. And the tables were the same length as this, but about double as wide, the kitchen table, and it was just heaped always of produce. And that's how we lived. That's the country folk. And my father in the desert always had a garden in the middle of the desert. I'm like, bro, you know what I mean? And we would take watermelon rinds and put them in when we planted the seeds, just to get a little extra. And so all of that, I remember thinking he was crazy when he was like, oh yeah, we're planting a garden. I'm just like, the desert? Yes. And we had a garden. And he'd come in the house so proud with this fruit and these vegetables, and he'd just kind of look at me like, yeah, player, this is the, it was that lesson. He's like, this just happened, that thing you were doubting. So that's what my art is about, those folks. So in all the paintings, all the sculptures, it's that black folks being on the land, being on dirt roads, being on well water, having to dig ditches, build fences, having cattle, having sheep. That's where I come from, and I'm trying to tell that iconography outside of a lens of just black suffering, but black being, but then not ignoring the ontological placement of black bodies inside of America. So we don't ignore that, but I'm telling that story. So that's what my art's about. And then there's those things that seep through from all the way from before the Middle Passage, Yeah. Yes.
This is actually a question I thought to ask you, but too late after we heard you in Portland for your thesis.
Oh, yes.
And in that talk, you mentioned a lot. You mentioned the viewer a lot. And the question I have is, we love your work.
Yeah.
We love you.
Yeah.
When you create art, do you think of black viewers and white viewers differently? Does it impact your art, or is that it's just like you create your art and
Sure.
take what you want from it?
There's this thing that happens when you're like in a room as a black person and you're the person speaking, and if you're in a mixed crowd where there's like a white person and a black person, or white people and black people, there's like almost a subconscious thing that you say things and black people get it, and pass white people because they don't have the acculturation. So I think that actually may happen in my work, but I'm not really thinking about that. I'm more thinking about Bakersfield, California, Cottonwood Road, 2 grown calves that we got from the sale, and trying to, and seeing like a big fish that got in their drinking water and having to get that out. And that image is stuck in my mind of this bloated fish in the water of the cows. And my uncle's like, oh, we got to get that out. And I'm like, how in the world did a fish get in this tub? But there was a creek and there was something, and there it was. And my uncle would go to the cell and he would get the cows that were sick because he could get them for cheap. And then he'd bring them home, feed them, and then go and sell them. And he'd tell me, we'd go to a calf and he'd go see if it can suck your finger and see if it can get up. If it can get up and stand, then we'll buy it. And that's just the blackest thing there is, to buy and sit. You know, it's like, oh, now this is still seeing the value in this animal and giving it dignity and bringing it home. And it got butchered, so, you know, dignity, you know. But it's that. So I'm thinking a lot about those memories, you know, more so than the viewer. Every once in a while, there's some crazy piece that I'll do that I'm like, ooh, this might fuck people up. But I'm not really worried about that so much, yeah. I think probably in grad school, I was probably thinking a lot about the viewer because, you know, it was hyper, you know, I had to pass. So I was like really, you know, hammering down on that. I really don't remember what I said. I gotta go back and look. So yeah, is that helpful?
Yes.
Lynette.
Going back on that point, how much does that influence where you decide to show?
Oh, where I decide to show?
Yeah, like what venues you choose to be in, or where you see. Does that have a big influence on you at all? The audience?
More the person, like real honest with you, the person in power. Are they cool? Have they done some work around black people? Like, can they get outside of their whiteness? Because typically they are white. And can they like see me in some capacity, or even if they don't see me, just kind of stay out of the way?
Are they willing to listen?
Yeah. So that's what determines like where I show is just like cool people. Like, is their ego? We all have egos, but is their ego? Can they manage their own ego a little bit? You know, or I kind of need a lot because I manage mine a lot, and I need someone to meet me there. Yeah. So that's what determines like where I show, and then like I've had people, galleries that I've worked with that I've built really beautiful relationships with. So, and we got through challenges together, and how we handle challenges, I'm like, oh, okay, if we can handle a challenge, then yeah, we can fuck with each other. We can really work, like we can do some stuff. So that's kind of how it goes, you know, yeah. And I think the level, like, because I do this full time, I need a gallery that is like, oh, we're gonna sell this, like has customers and can push it so it's not a waste of time financially. Mm-hmm. Those are the determining things. Did you have something, Frank?
Oh, well, I thought I'd save it for later, but
Let's do it.
just, you know, Aurora's question reminded me of what Thelonious Monk said. He said, I play the way I do so white folk won't understand.
Oh, that's funny. yeah, no, he was deep, man, you know, and that's funny. That lends itself to Kevin Young's book, The Gray Album. It's a big, thick book, but it's I think, and I'm not saying it wrong, but he was like, well, I'll say this because I know this is what his goal was. His goal was to write a book that theorized and encapsulated everything that is considered black. And I would say he did it. And the first 35 pages is about counterfeiting and being like hiding in plain sight, and that theoretical but practical or praxis that enslaved people did in the plantation, where they would hide in plain sight right in the master's house and doing this coded work. So I think that's been like a theme that's been a black thing from the beginning till today, you know, of black folks operating inside of white controlled spaces. And then sometimes even having to lead in white controlled spaces is you're doing some jazz stuff. You're doing this trickery, you know what I mean? That looks just like normal, like, oh, hey, no, how you doing? You know, yeah, that type of thing.
Well, I've seen it.
You can recognize it.
I knew a black dentist
Mm-hmm.
who, when he was home, he spoke completely different.
What was his
when he
name?
in his office.
What was his name?
Savage, Dr. Savage.
He was a
This is
savage.
We're talking 60 years
Yeah.
ago.
So you saw Dr. Savage was totally different at home.
Dr. Savage was totally different than, I don't remember his first name.
Yeah. Dr. Savage.
Jim or whatever.
Yeah, it was Jim at home.
Yeah,
Right.
that's right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you guys. This is fun. Anything else? You got anyone else? Yeah, yes.
What parts of yourself do you think portray the most in your art? Like, and what do you think your art portrays in that sense? What would you like it to portray?
I would like it to portray the truth, the authenticity, and I think I would like it to portray. I think a lot of times, what it portrays is the power and the vulnerability and tenderness in one space. So it's like a philosophical cubism, right? Cubism being two perspectives at the same time in a painting. So that, which all comes from Black art. You know, Picasso, that all came from them looking at Black artifacts and painting Black images. Trying to figure out like the Western horizon line and the history of painting inside of that, and then trying to come to terms with that. So I think I'm carrying on that multifaceted way of being, because we get so narrowed down. So I'm trying to, definitely the tenderness and the power, like you can't shrink back, but you also are very tender at the same time, and those things get lost so much of the time. So much of the Black experience is being in duress and in grief and in joy at the same time, where you're joyful but you're also in grief. So I think that's it. It's trying to get that. Yeah, that's it right there. Yeah. Cool. Right on. Is our cup full? We good? All right. Yes. See you later. All right. Thank you, guys. Yes. Thank you. Awesome. And thank you guys for the tech support. That was great.